There's something secret flying in the skies over Ukraine. This isn't some brand new weapon that Ukraine has developed. It's not a mold-breaking drone or a special kind of mission. Ukraine's big secret is that there are sky masters entering its airspace, and those masters don't come from Ukraine. They're Dutch, and they're doing the unthinkable by completely disregarding the biggest red line that Russia has for the Ukraine war. Dutch pilots are flying in Ukraine. At least that's according to a French report, initially published by Intelligence Online and then widely circulated. And if this explosive report is true, there's a secret within the secret that we're going to reveal a little later in the video. Starting with the Dutch involvement, the aviationist has the basics. It says that the French report claims that Ukraine has created a mixed squadron of Ukrainian and Dutch pilots who are flying combat missions over Ukraine in F-16s. Initially, there is one thing that makes sense with this amazing claim. The Netherlands has been one of the biggest providers of F-16s to Ukraine, having delivered 24 of the US-made airframes by the end of May 2025. It sort of makes sense that Dutch pilots would be helping Ukraine learn how to use these airframes, but flying combat missions over Ukraine, well, that would be big. The unbelievable report continues, adding that this mixed unit was created in recent weeks, and that it is being staffed by Dutch pilots who are serving in Ukraine on temporary contracts. The unit has been formed in the strictest secrecy, UNN adds, and one of the ideas behind it is to integrate NATO's collective knowledge of aerial combat into the realities that Ukraine faces in its skies. The pilots that Ukraine is hiring on temporary contracts are all veterans of war, having previously served in arenas in the Middle East and Afghanistan, which means they understand the tech on board the F-16 and can show Ukraine's pilots how to maximize their use of it. So, there are a couple of things that we can take away from this part of the report. The first is that this report is yet more confirmation that Ukraine is recruiting foreign fighters into its military. Frankly, that is no big secret. Where Russia uses deception to recruit as many foreign soldiers as it can for Putin's strategically inept meat assaults, Ukraine has formed an entire unit that it openly advertises to foreign fighters who want to join its cause. Named the International Legions of Defense of Ukraine, this massive unit exists to enable Ukraine to organize the huge influx of fighters from overseas who have arrived to take up arms against Russia. According to the organization's recruiting center, fighters from 75 different nations have joined the Legion, which is separated into battalions that are under the command of the ground forces of the armed forces of Ukraine. We say is separated. That has become was separated. In an interesting twist to Ukraine's use of foreign fighters, the International Legions of the Defense of Ukraine was officially disbanded at the end of 2025. All of the fighters who had signed up to be part of those legions were disseminated into the wider Ukrainian military, where they'll be serving a variety of purposes. Now, according to the BBC, 2 of the 4 legions that made up this organization had already been merged into Ukraine's assault forces by mid-December 2025. Another of the legions was in the process of merging, while the 4th legion was being converted into a training center. Did the Dutch fighter pilots sign up for Ukraine's fight via these legions? Well, if they did, we can assume that they're acting independently of their own country, which is something of a workaround to Putin's outright refusal and the virulent threats he has spewed about the prospect of NATO troops heading into Ukraine. A pilot isn't technically a NATO flyer if that pilot isn't actively serving their own country. Of course, as we'll explore in a while, Russia isn't going to be happy either way. Whatever mechanism the Dutch pilots used to get in, they're apparently flying for Ukraine now. That brings us to the second thing we can take away from the report. The aviationist says that the Dutch flyers are apparently signing 6-month contracts with Ukraine, which allows the pilots to rotate in and out of the country while ensuring that Ukraine has a consistent supply of flyers who understand their Western airframes better than anybody. Now again, this is all according to the Intelligence Online report, which has yet to be substantiated independently. But if this is true, it shows that Ukraine is treating its new airborne unit as a serious military division. There is no hiring with the intent of squeezing every last drop out of the Dutch pilots until they die through exhaustion while flying. Ukraine knows how valuable these pilots are, as well as how valuable the fighters that they fly are, and it is making sure that its valuable volunteers are treated well. As for what those volunteers are doing, it looks like a lot more than training Ukraine's pilots. In another move that will infuriate Putin, the Dutch pilots that Ukraine has in its secret unit are reportedly taking part in almost daily air defense missions. In those missions, they're using their airframes to shoot down Russian drones and missiles, such as the Shahed-like Russian Gerans and Russia's Kh-101 and Kalibr cruise missiles. Again, we see a little bit of a workaround at play here, because based on this mission profile, it seems that Ukraine is being very careful about having its Dutch pilots attack inanimate objects rather than Russian soldiers. That takes away leverage from Putin in the sense that it stops him from claiming that NATO-trained aviators are killing Russian troops. This is smart, very smart. And Ukraine's brilliant use of its foreign flyers is made even smarter by the revelation that one of their more significant contributions to the war effort is the employment of the Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod, which the aviationist says is used for targeting and range identification purposes. Ukraine's pilots need to learn how to use this type of pod, and the Dutch pilots are apparently showing them in real time. Again, this is all being done in secret, but we told you earlier that there is a secret within the secret. Do you want to know what it is? Well, we're about to tell you. But before we dig into that, this is the Military Show, and we always bring you the full picture. Subscribe today to look beyond the headlines and always stay ahead of the curve. Now, the secret within a secret. Okay, it's not just Dutch pilots that are part of Ukraine's new aerial unit. American pilots are also flying missions over Ukraine. According to the revelatory report, Ukraine is just as happy to sign up US pilots as it is pilots from any other country. At least one of those pilots is a veteran of the conflict in Afghanistan, where he reportedly flew numerous combat missions. Oh, and there's another who is believed to have flown missions in the Middle East, perhaps during the Iraq War. They're joining Dutch colleagues, many of whom have graduated from leading European air combat schools known for their advanced training in interception and modern aerial warfare, the aviationist reports directly from the Intelligence Online revelations. This part of the report seems like it comes out of left field. After all, most assumed that the US absolutely wouldn't allow any of its soldiers, former or otherwise, to work in Ukraine because of fears that doing so could result in an escalation of tensions with one of the few nuclear powers that can go toe-to-toe with the United States. Except American veteran pilots heading into Ukraine may not be as crazy as it seems. Back in 2024, US Senator Lindsey Graham even suggested that Ukraine could start hiring American pilots, which is an idea he appears to have had following a meeting with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Did Zelensky put the idea in Graham's head? Was it the other way around, and Graham voiced the idea and Zelensky took it and ran? These are questions to which we may never have the answers, but we do know what Graham said at the time. As he claimed, retired F-16 pilots who want to fight for freedom may be hired by Ukraine. Ukrainians will look among NATO countries for ready pilots who have retired to help them until Ukraine trains its pilots. Graham suggested that such an approach would enable Ukraine to use the F-16s it was due to receive even earlier. Whether he thought that the veterans he suggested taking up a Ukrainian offer would end up flying combat missions or not is another question that may never be answered. Regardless, if the report about Ukraine's new aerial unit is true, it could have a massive impact on the future of the Ukraine war and the relationship between Russia and NATO. Stick with us because we'll be exploring what that impact might look like soon. Before we do, there are a couple of important aspects to this story that need to be covered. First, Ukraine says that it isn't true. Now, according to United 24 Media's article on the incendiary French report, the head of the communications department of the Ukrainian Air Force Command, Yuri Ignat, has already come out to supposedly debunk the claims of Dutch and US pilots flying in Ukraine. Yesterday evening, the French outlet Intelligence Online published news that Ukraine had created a secret F-16 squadron made up of Ukrainian, American and Dutch pilots. And of course, the squadron is led by Tom Cruise, Ignat joked. So, that's it then. The story amounts to nothing, right? Well, not necessarily. Remember that this is supposed to be a secret unit of pilots, and the first rule of keeping a secret is that you don't start blabbing when somebody starts talking about what that secret might be. In other words, Ignat may be denying that the unit exists specifically because it does exist, and he wants to ensure that Russia stays off the trail. As for why, well, there could be a few reasons. Ukraine may not want Putin to really know how much help it is getting from veteran Western pilots, be that on the training or direct mission front. Those pilots may also be wary of causing an escalation that impacts their countries, even if they are mercenaries, so they may have asked Ukraine not to reveal their involvement. This is all speculation, of course, but the point is that we can't necessarily assume that the denial of the existence of a secret unit is evidence that the unit doesn't exist. I mean, it's a secret unit. You're supposed to deny its existence. And as for the second aspect, around the same time that the news broke of Ukraine's secret aerial unit, Russia had launched yet another of its massive missile and drone barrages against Ukraine. United 24 media reported on the barrage, noting that Ukraine had managed to transform its F-16s into mass drone hunters by using APKWS-2 guided rockets to destroy the vast majority of what Russia sent into the country. All told, Ukraine's air defenses managed to destroy or suppress 392 of 425 targets during the attack, which took place overnight between February the 16th and February the 17th. Among the downed projectiles were 367 of Russia's drones, 20 Kh-101 cruise missiles, 4 Iskander-K cruise missiles, and 1 Kh-59 or Kh-69 guided air-launched missile. Those who remember a throwaway line we said earlier in the video may have felt their ears perk up when we said the Kh-101 just now. Why? Well, just a few minutes ago, we told you that Ukraine's unit of foreign flyers is taking part in operations where they shoot down this specific type of missile, according to the Intelligence Online report. So again, unanswerable questions have to be asked. Chief among those questions is also the most obvious. Were there any Dutch or American pilots in the skies on the night of February the 16th? Well, if there were, Ukraine would never have confirmed it. So let's switch focus to something else that makes this defense of Ukrainian territory remarkable. The use of APKWS-2 rockets is particularly interesting here. As Army Technology points out, these munitions can be launched from rotary wing, fixed wing, and unmanned platforms, so we know that Ukraine's F-16s are likely to be compatible with them. The rockets are also cheap, at around $30,000 to $35,000 per unit. They cost roughly the same amount as Russia's Shahed drones, which could make them ideal in terms of dealing with Russia's mass drone assaults. Ukraine would prefer the rockets to be even cheaper, of course, but a like-for-like cost is better than spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on more advanced missiles to take out drones. However, the really interesting aspect of this particular weapon comes from footage that the Ukrainian General Staff shared on X, which shows a bevy of the strikes that its F-16s carried out during the massive Russian attack. At around the 19-second mark, we see a targeting system lock onto what appears to be a Russian drone, which is destroyed moments later by a relatively slow-moving projectile that has all of the flight characteristics of the APKWS-2. But that's not the most interesting part. We'll let United 24 media explain. The strike appears to have been recorded through an AN/AAQ-33 Sniper advanced targeting pod, whose on-screen interface closely matches what is visible in the released footage, though only the central portion of the display was shown, the outlet says. Now, if your ears perked up at our earlier mention of Kh-101s being destroyed by Ukraine's fighter jets during Russia's aerial assault, they'll be almost flying off your ears now. Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod, the exact kind of pod that the Intelligence Online report claims that Ukraine's Dutch and US pilots have been helping Ukraine to use in the very types of situations that Ukraine found itself in on the night of February the 16th and February the 17th. Of course, this is far from official confirmation that the alleged secret foreign aerial unit was involved in shutting down this recent attack. But still, the circumstantial evidence seems to be mounting, so maybe the unit that Ukraine claims doesn't exist is actually very real, and it's doing exactly what the French report says it does. Even with so many of the details being shrouded in mystery, there are clear ramifications that the existence of this unit will have on the Ukraine war, assuming the Intelligence Online report turns out to be true. Russia, for one, will be fuming. Well, actually, it already is. The Russian news agency TASS is already carrying comments from Russian mouthpieces who are saying the things that Putin himself is too afraid to say in public. The spokesperson for Russia's foreign ministry, Maria Zakharova, has already delivered a snarky response to the news that Dutch pilots may be flying in Ukraine. First, The Hague provided Kyiv with 24 decommissioned F-16 fighter jets. Now it seems that the decommissioned pilots have been added to the list of discarded equipment. Likely the next development will be the downing of these pilots. This is a stark example of Dutch pragmatism, Zakharova claimed, seemingly blind to the fact that Ukraine hasn't lost one of its F-16s since June 2025, which doesn't exactly bode well for Russia's track record of taking down airframes that Ukraine is getting better at flying and that the Dutch pilots understand extremely well. The spokeswoman's snark turned into outright hypocrisy later on as she added, "We would like to remind everyone that mercenaries are outside the scope of international law. They are not protected by the Geneva Conventions." Really? We mean, really, Russia? The country that has entire mercenary paramilitary groups operating in Ukraine and around the world is going to bring up international law. The same country that has been reported to have hired at least 18,000 foreign mercenaries as of early 2026, and likely has many more than that number. If that's the leg that Russia is going to try to stand on, then it's going to have a difficult job of it. The leg has no knee, ankle, shin bone. Basically, Russia doesn't have a leg to stand on. And it has mercenaries too. I mean, it's not Ukraine's fault that it uses its foreign fighters a lot better than Russia ever has. And perhaps the more worrying aspect of this story, at least for NATO, is that the supposed secret pilots come from the Netherlands and the US, both of which are members of NATO. Setting aside that the pilots are reportedly veterans who are no longer serving, Russia has made it very clear that it considers any NATO forces in Ukraine to be a red line that will result in a drastic escalation. Even the prospect of NATO sending peacekeeping troops into Ukraine in the wake of a peace agreement has been unacceptable to Russia. As the campaign for nuclear disarmament points out, both France and the UK have pledged to put boots on the ground in Ukraine to sustain a peace agreement, which prompted an immediate reaction from Russia in which it said that any foreign troop bases or military infrastructure that is found on Ukrainian territory would be evidence of direct foreign intervention and would thus be seen as legitimate targets. Russia seems to be considering the Dutch and US pilots reportedly flying in Ukraine in the same way. However, what that means in terms of an escalation is yet to be seen. For a start, the entire report on which this is all based hasn't been independently verified, and Ukraine certainly isn't going to confirm that it's true. Russia has no idea if there are any foreign pilots in the skies over Ukraine, and even if they are, those pilots seem to be very carefully directed to take out drones and missiles, in addition to training Ukraine's forces on how to better use their F-16s. So, if by chance Russia does kill a Dutch or US pilot in Ukraine, it may face a NATO backlash that is just as big as what Russia is claiming that it will do if NATO does officially enter Ukraine. And in the end, we have to recognize the fact that these are all rumors. As the aviationist points out, rumors about Western pilots flying in Ukraine have been circulating for a long time without any official confirmation. This is the closest that we've come to getting confirmation so far, but we're still talking about an unsubstantiated report that Ukraine has outright denied. And for now, the reports have to be treated as unconfirmed, which only muddies the waters further for Russia. It can throw around all the threats that it wants, but without any proof, those threats don't amount to much for NATO. And ironically, what we are seeing now is Ukraine seemingly gleefully reveling in inflicting the same kind of disinformation tactics on Russia that Putin tries to use to fool the rest of the world. Are there Dutch and US pilots in Ukraine, or is it all just rumors? Russia will never know, because Ukraine has gotten a lot better at keeping secrets. It's not about to let the cat out of the bag anytime soon on this one. The one thing that we know for certain is that Russia has to be very concerned about Ukraine's F-16s. Even without Western pilots, Ukraine has learned how to use these powerful airframes very quickly, and back in November, it used them to unleash hell on Russia. Find out how in our video, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to The Military Show for more astounding revelations and your daily dose of news about the Ukraine war.